Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 22 of Spirit of Le Mans, the review series where I'm evaluating the best and worst points of each major Le Mans prototype on Gran Turismo 6. So in this episode, as you can see, we'll be reviewing the second of the two Audi R8 LMPs. This is the 2001 version, which is slightly less powerful but also significantly lighter. And this is the car which completely or almost completely dominated the early 2000s Le Mans 24-hour races, and that really started Audi on their almost unbeatable line of Le Mans wins, basically. So how does it drive on the game? Well, let's go to the track and find out. So the R8 is, as we've said, one of the most successful Le Mans prototypes ever. So surely it's going to be pretty good on all three of our tracks. Well, I was expecting so, because the Team Orica version, which I reviewed a few videos back, did reasonably well. It didn't do amazing, but it was reasonable. And this one weighs 50 kilos less and has less power, which, although you'd think would be a disadvantage, could potentially mean a more manageable car. Well, on city tracks, it's okay, to be honest. It's not great, but it's not bad. There's a bit of wheel spin, which isn't that hard to counter. For acceleration, I'm going to give it a 5, because it is very good. And for brakes, I'm going to give it a 5, because the brakes on this car are very good. They do a good job of scrubbing off all the speed and power. But the low speed handling, I'm only going to give it a 4, because, again, it's okay. It's very Audi. It's kind of clinical, nothing special, really. And overall for city tracks, I'm going to, again, give it a 4, because it's not among the fastest, but it's not among the slowest either. It's just, again, it's okay. So, a rather uninspiring result, really, from a city track. But how does it do on a higher speed, moderate speed, technical track? Well, let's go to Ascari and find out. Now, the R8 has 1,020 horsepower, fully tuned, and it weighs 900 kilos. So you would think, being also a more modern prototype from 2001, that it would be great on this type of track, because this type of track, moderate speed technical tracks, make up the vast majority of Gran Turismo 6's circuits. But I've got to say, it's awful. It is by far the worst prototype I've driven on a moderate speed technical track, and for mid-range handling I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5, and I believe that's the first prototype in this series that I've given a handling of 3.5 out of these full-on LMPs, that is. It's just too unpredictable. Now, on city tracks we said it's okay, but on this track it set the second fastest lap, which was good, so I am going to give it a 4 out of 5 for technical tracks overall, because you can't deny the fact that it is fast. But the handling is so unpredictable. Yes, it got the second fastest lap, but it took me about 7 attempts just to get a clean lap. Because 1 minute it's got tons of grip and understeer, but then for no reason whatsoever it will just suddenly lose grip mid-corner, and every single time I drove it on this track it spun out on a different corner. So the handling is just too unpredictable in my opinion. Now, I'm sure there are people who love this car, but for my driving style, I just consider this car to be awful on this kind of track. So that's it for moderate speed tracks. What's it going to be like on high speed tracks? Well, let's go to Spa and find out. Now, thankfully, it does start to redeem itself on high speed tracks. After all, it was on a high-speed track, one of the highest-speed tracks in the world, that this car had most of its victories, Lasarte. But obviously, as we've said before, Spa isn't as high-speed as Lasarte, no way near. So how does it perform on a track that is high-speed, but still has a number of relatively technical corners? Well, it actually does pretty well, and that's the weird thing about this car, and it's why I don't really like it. Although it's okay on city tracks and pretty good on high-speed tracks, for anything in between it's just too unpredictable, and that is why I don't like it overall. It's just not consistent. This car is too temperamental for my liking. Now, for high-speed handling I am going to give it a 5. because when you get right up to those really, really high speed corners, the handling is very good, very smooth. And for high speed tracks overall, I'm going to give it a 5, because on high speed tracks such as La Sarthe, this track, it is a good car. It is among, say, the top 6 or the top 7 quickest that I've tested in this series. But for overall drivability, I'm only going to give it a 4. Because although, as we said on Ascari, it can set, say, the second fastest lap on a certain track, the amount of effort that you have to put in to get that time just isn't worth it, in my opinion. Now, I'm sure there are certain ones of you who love this car and who use it regularly, but it's just too inconsistent for my liking. So that's it for our track testing. Now let's finally go back to the garage for a roundup. So overall, I definitely wouldn't say that the Audi R8 is a useless car. Like all prototypes, it does have its merits, but it is definitely one of the more challenging prototypes to really get the best out of. Now, interestingly, on a small side note, when or just before I started doing the laps for this review, I noticed something strange about this car. And that is that I've always referred to this car as the Audi R8 Infineon. I know it's not called that, but that's just the way I refer to it, and I refer to the other one as the R8 Oreca. But I then noticed, just before preparing this video, that the Infineon logo that features on the nose cone and on either side of the car has been, as you can see here, blocked out by these little black blocks by Polyphony. I don't know why they've done that, but obviously Infineon isn't on the game anymore, so I don't know if they've had a fallout with the owners of the track or what, but interesting little thing that I never noticed before. But getting back on track, I'd say the best point about the R8 is that it does have the capability of giving you a very fast lap, and it is a very competitive car. But the downside is it's just so unpredictable. The handling is so unreliable. One minute it feels good, and then the next minute you'll be wanting to throw your controller or your steering wheel through your TV, because it's just not a reliable handling car. So overall, would I recommend it? Well, of course. I don't want to let my personal preference prevent someone from potentially buying a car that they may love. So of course I would recommend that you try this car. I'd recommend that you try pretty much any car at least once. But I would recommend that you be very, very selective as to what track you decide to use this car on. And regardless of what track you decide to use it on, make sure, above all else, that you train yourself driving this car. Do plenty of laps to really learn how to use this car, how to cope with its handling flaws, and how to get the best out of it. So as always, I'll put the ratings and lap times that it achieved in the description if you want to compare it to the other prototypes. And as always, thanks for watching.